Hello and welcome to Public Report. I'm your host, Desiree Horde, and our guest today is Deacon Steve Przedpelski of the Franciscan Peacemakers. Our issue is crime and our topic, human trafficking. It's so nice to have you on the show today.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Thank you. Please tell us about yourself and your work with the Franciscan Peacemakers.
Okay. I'm a deacon of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, Roman Catholic. I'm presently assigned at St. Gabriel Parish out in Hubertus, which is just east of Holy Hill. But my main ministry is with Franciscan Peacemakers, where I'm the executive director. And right now, we primarily work on the streets, reaching out to women, men, and children who are engaging in prostitution on the streets.
What is human trafficking?
Human trafficking, depending on whose legal definition, but the general definition is a person who is forced into sex work or manual labor. Farm workers sometimes are considered trafficked because they're taken away from their surroundings, and they're forced. Like in Florida, there were cases of homeless people taken to orange groves to pick oranges, 300, 400, 500 miles from where they knew where they were living at.
Right.
Sex workers, it's the same thing. Human trafficking came on the radar in the United States somewhat after 9/11, when people started paying attention to what was going on at the borders, and people were being brought in from other countries for the purposes of being sold and resold for sex work up and down the East Coast and the West Coast. And it has moved throughout the whole country. The center at one point in last 2-3 years was Toledo, Ohio, because people were being brought in easily from Canada to be trafficked.
Now, is this a growing concern then?
It's a growing, there's more growing awareness of the problem, and which leads to more concern. And the concern was really with foreigners being brought in, but as more and more people are paying attention, we have a lot of domestic individuals who are also being trafficked.
Can you tell us about the criminal element that's involved, and why do perpetrators engage in this type of behavior?
That's really a good question, because up till when human trafficking came on the radar, the number one contraband being sold in the country was illegal drugs and guns. Human trafficking, depending on statistics at any given time, moves to number one, because the resale value of a human being is there. The person can be used over and over again. A woman, for instance, could be working for one individual in the state of Maryland, and then she is sold to another trafficker somewhere in the Midwest in Illinois, and brought to Wisconsin to work, and sold again and sold again. Whereas a gun, has some resale value. Drugs, you sell it and use it once, and has no resale value.
And so do you feel that the reason the perpetrators are engaging in this is strictly money?
Oh, it's strictly money. Yeah, absolutely.
Are there other criminal activities directly linked to this type of the human trafficking?
Whether it's officially organized crime or not, I don't know the answer to that. But our experiences of what we perceive to be human trafficking on the streets of Milwaukee, and I can't say if it fits the legal definition, but we know it's associated with drug trafficking, for instance. Whether it's gang related, I can't answer that question. My understanding is more that these are smaller groups of individuals operating around here. Like there was a father-son team that was trafficking young girls. But I also know from talking with people in California, it is a lot bigger, a lot more organized.
How are the victims' lives changed and affected by it?
Oh, the change, in so many cases, they're easily lured because they're coming out of situations where they've experienced sexual abuse or some sort of abuse. And so they're looking, from our conversations, they're looking for someone who they think really loves them. So they're tricked. They're tricked initially. This guy may come across as being the young woman's boyfriend, and being really nice to her and grooming her without her knowing it. And then one day, he may become violent and say, you have to do this for me if you love me. And he's worked on controlling her. He gains control of her, and then she begins to fear for her life.
How do you reach out to people then that are stuck in this lifestyle?
In our work, we are on the streets where prostitution happens, and prostitution happens more than on the streets.
Right.
A lot through social media, you have escort services, through strip clubs. But we work primarily on the streets where prostitution occurs. And we are reaching out, whether it's women who are older in their 30s or 40s and working for themselves. They're not being pimped out, they're not being trafficked. But we talk to them primarily when we're looking for young kids, and they'll be on the lookout. They'll tell us when young girls are in the neighborhood. They'll tip us off when they see whether it's a pimp, whether it's a trafficker. And again, we don't know whether it fits the official guideline.
Okay.
But they're being used. I mean, there's no question about it, and
Right.
somebody's controlling them. And so we reach out actually through the older women who are prostituting. They will bring the young girls when it's safe for the young girls to come to our van,
Okay.
because they're told not to go near us or any other outreach
I'm sure.
people that are there, because we may steer them in the right direction.
Correct.
And so we always carry food with us. Food is a wonderful way to have conversations with people, even if it's for 2 or 3 minutes. If a person's injured, it's not a serious injured, we administer first aid. We listen, but generally younger girls, they're not talkative. They're shy. They know, again, not to talk. And so you can see the fear in their faces at times. But we reassure them if they're ready. They can talk to one of the women on the streets. One of the women will get in touch with us. We'll work to get them off the streets.
Have you found that they have other needs, maybe in addition to obviously food, or maybe, have you ever found maybe medical needs that they have, or?
Oh, there's all sorts of needs that they do have. And the traffickers will get them to doctors' offices. They'll take them to the ERs, whether it was injuries inflicted while they were being prostituted, or illnesses that come up.
Right.
And the traffickers are very controlling again. And so my colleague and I, we've done like in-services at St. Mary's Hospital,
Okay.
teaching the social workers and residences and nurses what to look for and what questions
Right.
to ask of young girls, young boys for that matter, just to see if the trafficker is doing all the talking for the possible victim, to try to get a separation of the two and see if they can really talk to the individual. I also know, like at the 16th Street Clinic on the south side of Milwaukee, the social workers have shared with us, that they know they're dealing with people who are being trafficked.
Wow.
And they are asking the right questions and giving and again, primarily girls, young women, the information they need
Okay.
if the possibility to make the break occurs. But they will also work to separate the handler from the girl, so they get those few moments.
How difficult is it for the victims to actually get free from the traffickers?
Oh, I would say it's very difficult. That they threaten the victims themselves. They threaten the victim's family. If you're working, if there are people from other countries that are involved, where their passports have been taken, they have connections back to those countries, and they, again, threaten to kill their families, to do harm to them. People from other countries actually have, it's more difficult, because the countries they come from, they are in fear of the police.
Okay.
And so the trafficker uses that
Right.
and says, it won't do you any good to go to the police because they're not going to help you.
Right.
And so they just prey on that and prey on that. So if it really comes down a lot of times to people who become aware that human trafficking exists, and to look for signs, something isn't right. Again, whether it's in a clinic, whether it's in a church. One of the first trafficking cases in southeastern Wisconsin was in Brookfield, where it was 2 Filipino doctors who had kept a woman
Right.
pretty much as their slave. And, people started paying attention that something wasn't right as they became aware of it. And that was able to help free this woman. And those 2 doctors had just finished part of their sentence, have I just read have been deported.
So I guess the main thing is really just making people aware, as you were saying, so that all of us, I guess, are a little bit more attentive to the people around us.
That's correct. And people, there's a distinction in law, whether it's people who are smuggled into the country for work,
Okay.
because people are smuggled in to do restaurant work, for instance.
Okay.
And the person does pay to come over, person becomes an indentured servant, doesn't fit the definition of human trafficking under federal law or under state law.
Okay.
So there's similarities, and people, it's important to pay attention as well to those surroundings. Other situations do arise.
And I'm sure sometimes people that are involved in human trafficking are some, especially the young people, are they actually maybe even abducted?
I've heard of cases. I can't say enough statistically whether
Okay.
that's true. Most of what I hear is being lured in.
Okay.
Now, and eventually one can make the argument dealing with a minor, especially the minors being held against his or her will, that it is an abduction.
Abduction, right.
But is it that somebody's just taken from the streets here in this country? I can't say that. I know it happens in other countries. I don't know to what the extent is.
Right. What do you believe needs to be done to put a significant dent in this problem of human trafficking?
I think emphasis, and I don't know if education is the only way, but looking at the whole industry, the whole sex industry.
Okay.
You know, sex industry accounts for billions of dollars on online pornography. The sex industry is, billions of dollars in the sex trade, whether it's, again, through escort services, strip clubs.
Okay.
We have a very unhealthy understanding of human sexuality.
Okay.
How we address that, I don't know. In our work, in the work that I've done more than 15 years in ministry, is sexual abuse as a child. A lot of people want to think that something only happens in the central city of Milwaukee. I live in the suburbs, minister in the suburbs as well, and I deal with people of wealth, people of means, who have had that history, how it affects them. They struggle in their adult lives, they struggle in their marriages. It leads to divorce in many cases, leads to misuse of their own sexuality, leads to the abuse of a child again, and so the cycle is repeated. We need a more holistic and holy education of what human sexuality really is about. That's an ongoing thing. Short term, to help address the needs on the streets as we see them, we are putting together an expansion of our ministry where we are going to open a house, in a house where women would be able to come from the streets after they've made the decision to leave the streets, to live in a community that is spiritually based, where their needs are being met for 2 years, where they have the opportunity to get their GED or go back to college, to work, and to also become part of our Franciscan Peacemaker community in some of the endeavors that we carry on.
Well, thank you. This has been very informative, and hopefully our viewers will take away from this just being more observant and being more aware, and hopefully we can make a dent in this problem. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Deacon Steve Przedpelski of the Franciscan Peacemakers. Our issue has been crime, and our topic, human trafficking. Thank you for viewing Public Report.
The material on this program does not necessarily reflect the views of WWRS.